Hello. Today is August 21st, 2024. This is Workgroup Serving weekly meeting. Welcome. As usual, we will start with the workstream updates. Orchestration is the first one.
Yeah, I'm covering this. The initial pull request for the serving catalog made it in. It set up the directory structure, two model servers support a couple of models. We have the kserve high level directory also initialized, and contributions there welcome. And then also there's an open PR as an example of how to add a model to the serving catalog under existing model servers. And then hopefully this week I can get a couple more model server support added. So please, if you have a chance to take a look, give some feedback, that'd be great.
What form do we think is most effective for feedback? I was kind of browsing through and had some thoughts, but I wasn't sure whether to do that on the PR that merged it, a separate doc, or if we wanted to actually maybe get feedback and sit down and chat about it. Like it did feel like maybe if people have time to absorb it, that maybe as a second step, we could go and have a longer form discussion with folks who are interested on just the different trade-offs in the YAML, maybe accumulate a bunch of comments and then discuss those comments as a group.
Yeah, I think a dedicated discussion would be awesome.
But a first round of review would be good too. Like if we have some comments on the PR, and then we can get together and discuss them.
Okay, yeah, I'll add any comments I have on the PR that merged whatever the latest state is. Probably just since there's at least a record of it in GitHub for others to look at.
Do we need to schedule a second half of next meeting for more feedback, or we find?
Yeah, maybe we'll just take 15 minutes in the next meeting I can add that to the notes.
Okay. Anything else? If not, then DRA. I'm covering DRA. So yesterday was a device management working group meeting. There is a start of planning for 132. Mostly just outline of all the caps we have and trying to gauge temperature of interest for many caps that we have. There are still many questions on how people will switch from DRA to from device plugin to DRA, and there are caps that still needs to be polished and completed. From our group, we will need to, if there is any feedback from our group on what can and should be changed from DRA perspective, let's give it to device management group. As I said, I'm planning to do some reviving of the old documents and to see if we can put any of DRA requirements back into prioritization. Okay. Auto scaling?
Yeah, I can take this one. So no concrete updates since last week's discussion about model caching. I actually need to catch up on that, so I will read over the notes and watch the recording. But one thing I was wondering is if we should start looking forward and possibly putting together proposals around work that we've been discussing in the work stream, particularly around benchmarking, and maybe even contributing to the serving catalog. Right, we can put some first drafts of auto scaling configuration there. So yeah, just some ideas. So maybe I'll schedule something so we can all get together and chat about this.
And after previous discussion, I chatted with Samuel Karp, and he pointed me to issues on OCI specs where we discuss where people discussing how to improve things. So discussions are definitely there. It's not clear like how much progress we can make because there are trade-offs how to implement it. So I will see if we can bring it a little bit higher on the priority list. Okay, multi-host.
Yeah, I can give the update. I think yeah, Yuan's out today, and I can help update the first item on behalf of him. Yeah, so the case of community, I think have a new proposal on the multi-node support. There's the proposal, the slide and the recordings. Yeah, feel free to take a look. And on the Kubernetes community side, I think I caught an issue on the new top-level APIs for the array as well. So in the past, there's only like rejob, reclusters, array services, and in our internal practice, we noticed it's hard to manage doing the rolling upgrade for the reservice. And since the multi-host becomes popular, we propose another like high-level API on top of the like the reclusters to manage those like applications like VLM. Yeah, so that's another proposal people can help review. Yeah, that's an update.
Yeah, I would be interested to get this deeper understanding of API. I wish like I joined the KCRF meeting but it was kind of in the background for me because I was doing something else as well. And my question was like, is there any DRA changes needed? Like I don't think the question of how to schedule multi-host close to each other, like so GPUs will be on the same network, wasn't covered very well in this meeting. So I wonder if anybody knows any details. Okay, maybe we can wait Yuan as well. Okay, with that we're done with workstream updates. Now open topics. First topic is gateway.
And I added this. So Sergey, you opened the repository repo request. Kellen opened a proposal last night to Kubernetes community. I didn't think about it, but I was going to actually say if we want to, that probably like proposals for the working group probably would be in Kubernetes, SIG's working group serving. But if we just want to add the comments there and then move them over wholesale, I'll follow up with Kellen afterwards. I don't know if anybody has a strong preference. Like, is there a reason that we would want to have the proposals in Kubernetes community? I don't know if there's any formal rules about how working groups manage proposals and whether they should or shouldn't reuse community.
I think either way works. And I think for repository, we are not blocked on proposing of sub-project. We can just request a repository. At least I didn't find any rules that are saying that you must have a project approved. I mean, we approve the project with SIG list, but we don't have to approve some project as a formal thing. One thing I wanted to check with the community is we discussed with Kellen that we likely will have code for instance gateway, like we will have like dense LoRa. Is there any interest to have a regular gateway as well that doesn't have dense aspect of it in the same repository? Like because we name repository LLM instance gateway rather than like just LLM gateway.
I might suggest having a separate one. Like the instance gateway is kind of like try to scope it as small as possible. That's orthogonal. But I do think when we talked about this before, I think we kind of see there could be a couple of different APIs. I think the LLM instance gateway API design will end up being distinct from a regular gateway, but I don't think we know that yet. So maybe we kind of just need a concrete proposal for what the high level gateway use cases would look like, whether that's to serving or whether that's to the Envoy group or whether that's to the Gateway project. I don't know, matters. So maybe we just wait. I don't know. Anybody? Dan's not here. I know Dan kind of is the driver of that. I don't see Dan. Maybe we can
This
just
was
hold
my
the
understanding as
Dan.
well, but I'm interested if anybody in community wants to contribute.
Okay. I'll just put that as a question in the agenda docs. And yeah, if anybody wants to propose that, please do. And so then, yeah, so the next steps would be Song's been chatting with various folks and helping to pull together like an API proposal above and beyond the POC. I think that would be like the first. That would be the first proposal that we would put in the new repo, and then there'd be a second proposal, which is architecture based on the implications, design choices around the Envoy, et cetera. So does that make sense? Is there any feedback on that? If anybody has any opinions there. And then Sergey, do we need to request a chat channel separately? And then maybe like in terms of like how we would want to manage it as a working group. I'm not sure, like, from previous experience with Q or other projects, like how do we want to manage as the working group having a spin-off, having like a spun-off sub-project that we're responsible for the process for? How do we think that should work?
I see most of the Q questions in the work group batch right now. So I don't think people get lost too much. So at the moment, I don't feel increasing entropy will help, but if we'll see that only a certain dedicated set of people working there and like all the questions are basically about this, we can probably request group later.
And then anybody have any strong opinions on process? Like, do we want to use this meeting do we want to treat it as a work stream that might be consistent? Like, so we just say that there's a work stream on LLM Inference Gateway. And if we start other projects in the future, those would just be treated as work streams and they could choose to meet in the regular meeting or not. I'd probably say for the Instance Gateway, we want some high bandwidth weekly conversations. I think maybe at least for the first few weeks, we could try to have separate meetings and then try to get in the cadence for the folks who want to deeply engage on that, and then do a summary in this meeting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see a few hands, like few thumbs ups. I'm not the best person to answer that. Kellen probably will be the best person to tell if just reusing this meeting works. So whatever, Kellen, whatever you need, and whatever anybody else wants to contribute, please let me know. I can help, and any other chairs of this meeting can allocate any like Zoom calls, like Zoom links, whatever needed.
Yeah, I think that sounds great. Separate meeting for the details and then summarizing here is perfect to me.
Okay.
And we can post details.
Link or anything,
yeah. Yeah, we can post the Zoom link in the cadence in the working group chat.
Any other structural questions? Like, we're kind of testing out what process we would use for sub projects. Anything else folks can think of? Kellen, anything you've thought of? Oh, one would be owners. So it would be good for the repo to get a set of owners from diverse companies, and then think about, like, just do a quick README proposal as well as we get the repo up. So maybe we can discuss that at the first meeting as well. That could probably be the third of the initial discussions, like describe the purpose really clearly and succinctly for people stumbling on the repo.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. Yeah, my main concern is just getting the repo up and moving, and then we can move all relevant data there. Like you said, if someone stumbles upon it, they know what it is.
Okay. We exhausted this topic. Moving on to the next one. The next topic is a question. Do you want to talk more about model caching? Ray, do you want to drive any discussions today, or you want to move it to the next one?
I didn't put this here, but happy to chat about it. I'm definitely not up to date to what was discussed last week. So yeah, I don't know. Clayton, maybe you pick up.
I just put it here so we could at least discuss, because we didn't decide to have it. We've said we're going to tee it up, and then we didn't. So there's at least a couple discussions. So there's K-serves proposals. The NVIDIA NIM operator has caching. Eduardo and I chatted about that. There's the caching discussions around OCI, and then there is, anything that we could do with container images, shared layers, caching, etc. And maybe another one was, are there any functional requirements people have on caching that are hard to accomplish in Kubernetes today, which is more of an open-ended. So those are the four intersecting topics. We went pretty deep on the OCI one already, so we could probably say that's the next step. But I guess I am interested in, if people aren't really concerned about this because they mostly just throw something together and move on, is there a strong interest in finding elements of commonality or gaps in Kubernetes that we could specifically spec? I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, this is a Kubernetes problem because you need a large chunk of content to show up on a node to get started. And we have a number of mechanisms today. I think my fundamental question always comes down to, are those mechanisms sufficient, adequate, or inadequate, but people mostly work around them? And I felt like we're somewhere in between, in the middle. Like, I don't feel that they're sufficient. And I don't feel that everyone successfully works around them. So that was kind of that was the framing that I might say for a discussion.
I have a question about framing. When we're talking about model caching discussion, do we include caching like preheated models, like something loaded and you do a snapshot and then load this from the snapshot? Or we're mostly talking about model caching in terms of like how to get raw weights distributed faster?
Yes. I think that's a yes, and because frankly, the big problem on serving that most people complain about is getting model weights to the right container. We have an auto-scaling group, which is about improving startup times. Therefore, distribution is a factor in that. I haven't heard of people complaining about, there's the training checkpointing one, that's Batch's problem. If there aren't any other additional problems where people aren't worried about it as much, or there isn't anyone who feels like they are on the hook to solve this for a particular set of users broadly, then maybe it's a little bit less lower priority. All right. I think that's a low interest for this time. Ray, why don't you and I chat and figure out what topics we would want to propose and queue those up before the next agenda.
Yeah, sounds good. And I apologize for not being up to date here.
That's okay.
Yeah, we can bring it next time and make sure we have some topics primed, because I think you're right. There is interest, like Jeff posting in the comments here, that all of these are problems. So yeah, let's take it offline.
Yeah, I think one interesting topic Jeff brought last time, and I wonder if we can get people homework, like give people homework and understand So Jeff is from company that serves a lot of models to a lot of people. So the problem is like a lot of different versions of different models distributed to many nodes, and many other customers are a little bit different, who only serves like different versions of single model. Maybe like versions are changing, like not daily, like maybe like weekly or something. So those are two distinct problems, and I wonder if we can get any sense of what people will be using, how people will be using Kubernetes the most.
I will note, in my experience, there's no one who just has one model. And so many people who are on that smaller set will eventually be in the bigger set. It's just really unlikely that you only run one model or one fine tuning. So for that reason, I would say that former kind of generates the solving the former will help people in the long run. They may just not be particularly, it may not be their biggest problem. They're looking for a quick fix, and then they move on. Later on, they'll say, this is an obstacle. And then, yeah, I know Eduardo can't make it. I would like to actually, Eduardo and I had generated a few small items out of looking at the NIM operator on places to standardize in the ecosystem. So I'll follow up with Eduardo on that.
One thing I can just add here is, even to the point that everybody's running more than one model because of the scarcity of GPU capacity as well. I think caching the data and being able to quickly move that around is important for everybody, because let's say that even they're just they're rolling out a canary test, or then they're rolling out a switch to a new version of the model. Let's say they're switching from Llama 3 to Llama 3.1, something along those lines. There's going to be downtime during moving that data if it's not, and you want to have that as fast as possible. Essentially, I mean, because there's GPU capacity constraints, you're going to have to like shut down that pod and launch a new one and move the data and load it into the GPU. So there's ways to solve that, right? Like maybe move the data there first before you load it into the GPU. You're going to have the GPU like time no matter what, but if the data, there's mechanisms for getting prior, and etc.
And that you know, that's a great point, Jeff, too, because that applies to pods. Like, there's no reason that you wouldn't want to have something on clusters that ensures that there's at least some reasonable warming step. If you're going to launch, you know, if you've got something that has 80 replicas, the odds that you're only going to need exactly 80 hosts to serve it is very low. And so, you know, this kind of gets into some of the DRA longer term discussions that John was bringing up around. In the long run, we're very reactive. Like, Qubit is a very reactive model. It's nice. Reactive is the simplest possible way to implement something, which is, oh, I asked for a pod. I never expected for 1,000 replica deployment to ask for another pod. Who would have ever expected that? Oh, okay, well, let's schedule it. Oh my gosh, I've got to go download this. Who would have ever, you know, so I do think there's a lot of reasons why we really haven't taken that next step and started to say, what are policies or components in the system that could anticipate reasonable change? There may be some room there. Like, pre-pulling container images is like the stupid simplest thing you can do to improve container startup. Is there something that we could do consistent with either, you know, pre-populating PVs, empty DIRs, etc.?
Yes, absolutely. And I, you know, it's all, this is all designed for like there being like infinite elastic capacity to just expand onto and then move things over as soon as it's available and ready. And I mean, maybe we'll see that in the future, but right now with high performance GPUs, that's not a thing. And it's also expensive even in the future, even with whatever the leading edge GPU is, it's going to be expensive.
I think that's actually a better argument, which is there rarely have been scarce CPU types where everybody was competing to get the latest generation of a CPU. It's just not a thing that we've dealt with, but that will continue to be the case for accelerators for at least the next 5 or 6 years. And so I think just for that reason alone, Kubernetes over the next 6 years is going to have to help people mitigate the exact problem you just discussed. So maybe that's actually the best framing for it, which is, in a scarce environment on accelerators, what do we do to minimize downtime. Like we kind of have that framing on auto scaling, but maybe that's the kind of like the really good framing, I think, for a concrete problem approach solving.
I have a tangential like subject about this that is, I don't know if there's not necessarily a solution for Kubernetes itself. There's a solution from like the Kubernetes hosts is or like cloud providers is like having capacity for people to roll nodes available in a way that's like, and I don't know that, and that may be, I don't know if it's not necessarily a Kubernetes thing itself. So it's a bit out of context here. But one of the things we suffer with is if we have production workloads running on kube nodes, we can't do security patching of the nodes basically, because without having impact on workloads and without shuffling workloads around and managing that. There's not really like an inherent like good way of doing that without paying for, let's say like at the sticker price, the $100 an hour for instances. For larger organizations, it might not be a problem, but for people who are pushing the limits of like what they're running on this scarce capacity, it's a more challenging situation.
I think those are, and actually both of those I think are really concrete problems for us to say is like, maybe we haven't done this quite yet. We've been a little bit more exploratory in working group serving, but maybe what we should say is here's problems that we believe we should solve. So those both are problems, and they are problems that everybody will face across all environments, and we're incentivized to fix them. Others I know are as well. So therefore, maybe we can like transition. We have like the work streams, which is more about technology or problem areas. But if we instead focus on the problems, how do we drive to solutions for problems? So like the LLM instance gateway is about the problem of there's no real effective way to share large accelerator capacity for large language models. Instance gateway helps you share that plays to Kubernetes. The two problems you've just described, I think, are also valid. Maybe Sergey, like this is something we should like. We can say what are the problems that working group serving is accepting, and then have like a doc that we can add things to and say like this is a problem that we'd like to address, use case problem. And I like Jeff's framing of the two that he described. And we can add the LLM instance gateway to one, and we've got a couple of other threads like how do I run a model larger than a single host, which is multi-host. So instead, we basically just restructure the serving group around solving concrete problems. Now that we're generating nice terse definitions that we all agree on.
Yeah, I can try to formulate it this way. Yeah, I mostly approach this. I was thinking about Jeff question between meetings, and my biggest thing was many caching solutions that I'm reading about are designed to be like other bootstrap. So you need to bootstrap a new node to get a cache ready. And I feel that in AIML world, it's better to be something that can be dynamically added whenever you want to deploy something new. So
yeah,
from that
needs to be dynamic. Absolutely.
Yeah, I just wanted to frame our caching discussion not around bootstrap of a new node, but around how you add more caches to existing nodes. Yeah, Peter?
Something that I don't know if it's directly relevant here, but something that I had been thinking about recently. There was a talk at DevConf, which is a small little conference. I'm going to post the link to it, but I don't want to someone who's typing actively. But basically talking about like different ways to distribute, like to structure models inside of an OCI artifact so that you can share content between them, especially as like if imagine a world where like you have a model that's like constantly updating and you want to be like, sharing some of the layers of it. I wonder if like we as a community could be in a position where we would make recommendations on how you structure the files themselves. So then there could be like OCI level constructs, like, in the, containerd or cryo that help sort of distribute them better. Is that relevant in this conversation? I was like, that was listening earlier, and then I sparked up and came in.
Yeah, that I think in in ways of optimizing distribution, I'd say that one fits under the how do I efficiently reduce the amount of content that has to be distributed across diverse workloads that share large things. And that was the topic that we had in the auto scaling one. We didn't really come out of that discussion with here's what we should go do. So maybe when we frame the problems, I think reducing the amount of duplicated transfer for multiple workloads.
And also reducing the distance from which those those models are being transferred, because there are things like chunked DZ or like peer-to-peer image sharing that we could potentially be utilizing, where you're sharing it among nodes in a cluster before you're going to an external registry, or you're sharing smaller pieces of the image before you're going so I think that we could potentially come up with schemes that would help reduce the time. And I could see that being more of an auto scaling thing. Right. Or there was the other one, someone commented like Nidus, and I think there's another one like Dragonfly or something like that. There's a couple of different ones, but I think the advantage of having the OCI artifact be the model distribution mechanism is we have all of these pre-existing sort of optimizations for move this large set of files somewhere else. And so we're in a position where we could propose standard ways of distributing them that, reduce the startup.
Agreed. So Jeff, I'm capturing your two. I feel like the first one was there were really like two variations. Like if you have limited capacity, rollout is painful, and another one is kind of there isn't a. We're kind of talking about preemptiveness, but like infinite capacity. I feel like the two are kind of coupled. Maybe we just find a way to frame that second.
Yeah, like where does like the I don't know how to put this into like succinctly, but the fundamentals of Kubernetes are designed for elastic capacity availability. And we don't necessarily have that.
Yeah, and actually it's some Kubernetes, like interestingly, Kubernetes in on-prem environments rarely does node scaling. Like that didn't come in until 5 years after, but Kubernetes in the cloud, CPUs were always like there's new VMs at all the point. Both of those are being challenged. One is being challenged because you can't put multiple workloads on an accelerator effectively, and the other one is being challenged because there's not enough new capacity.
I suppose people in on-prem you have fungible capacity to some degree, right? Like, and that's.
I mean, generally you just have extra CPUs laying around on a VM somewhere, and or on a bare metal machine, because nobody gets to pass much past.
Your workloads aren't specific to the hardware they're running on generally.
And you also on premise you provision for peak. Cloud you generally provision for base plus diurnal. And in practice, neither of those are effective on Kubernetes. So I'll capture it that way. So let's see, are there any comments in any other like top level problems we'd want to frame? We can probably do this in a side discussion or generate a doc, but I actually would say I like the idea of taking the works. Oh, it was the multi-host one. That's what it was. Large model that requires. Framing some of the work stream and some of the discussions and some of the what are we going to do at each release to improve these problems? There's kind of like our list the problems, prioritize them, people commit to working on them. That model of engagement, I think we're probably ready to go from ideating to identifying the problems that we're going to tackle. Okay. Any other areas of this? I think the reducing the amount of content that must be brought on a node to start a pod is one succinct formulation, but there's multiple others. So maybe Ray and I will follow up on the next time. How do we frame up the discussion in terms of the list of problems?
I'll think of more problems for you all if I can.
And we should actually go, and Zhejian has a long list of problems. We should look at the ones that we haven't discussed yet or that we've presented and actually reframe them in terms of the problem list. I know that there's a bunch of topics, especially around like auto scaling. Most of it was around the auto scaling for objectives that are higher than CPU and memory, where, custom metrics is an acceptable answer, but specifically there's kind of the knowledge sharing of what works in production environments like what they have, as well as the step below, which is, are the Kubernetes primitives sufficient for auto scaling workloads? Actually, maybe a better way to frame it would be utilization and memory usage on accelerators is not as effective as it is for CPU workloads. Maybe that's just for auto scaling or something like that.
I actually have a question for the group here. Like, has anybody here actually used like a fully deployed like Nidus Dragonfly setup? I know there's, I mean, it came from, I think ByteDance is where Dragonfly originated.
Yeah, we used Nidus and the Dragonfly, the P2P part we rewrite like the in-house version. Yeah, so overall, I think we use this combination and get pretty good performance on the image acceleration. Yeah.
Do you know if that's successful with like very large images, or is not something that it's used for?
So for the super large images, we actually try to cache on the local node instead of relying on the lazy node or P2P. Yeah, so P2P we definitely use it, but the Nidus for the large image we think that still have some issues because the GPU workloads compared to the previous one have some differences. So I can get some like detailed feedbacks and share with the community later. Yeah. So we can talk about more on the technical details, like technical blockers.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to hear if like if you have direct connections with the folks who are responsible for that work. And I've watched some of the videos that they've done on like EROFS and CacheFS and how they do like some pretty fancy approaches to distributing and caching that data on the nodes and streaming the way that they talk about streaming images, but only caching like content addressable chunks of those images on the hosts when they're accessed. So like you're streaming these images, but you're only transferring to the host and keeping on the host the things that are accessed across like things. And then the other aspect is that even if you have two different like Docker images that have the same that might have the same data, some of the same data in them, even across images, they can share those content addressable sub chunks within an image. So it's some pretty interesting potential there, but I don't know how that would apply to like a broader environment because there's a lot of complexity in how that actually functions.
Hey, this is Fei. So I think last year's KubeCon, they have a talk about combining using the Dragonfly image streaming with a large language model image pooling in last year's, in this year's KubeCon EU. We have tried the image streaming along with the large language models, but there is a problem. The problem is this workload is actually not very friendly for this technology, because before you starting all the inferences, you have to load in the whole weights into the memory. So just these steps, we are pulling everything from remote, basically diminishing the benefits, right? So because you need to load all these image weights anyway. Whether you use image streaming or not doesn't really matter, because your containers may start earlier, but your application readiness still need to wait the whole thing be pulled from remotely.
Right.
But if you combine this with P2P, that's can be beneficial, because if you have multiple nodes already have the content, so you can theoretically reduce the time to pulling the images per node. But I think the takeaway from that experiment is you do have to have a seed node. Basically, you have a seed node ready. The node has a whole thing in the cluster ready, then which serves as a seed for P2P, right? If you have that node ready, you will see significant benefits. But if you don't have a seed node, basically you have a 30-ish or X number of nodes pulling at the same time from remote, even you enable P2P, at least the experiments results doesn't show it has a great benefit. So you do need to have a seed node. So that's a takeaway, basically.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Yeah, and some subtle issues here is depends. Some runtimes may. So let's say if there is a runtime doing parallel model weights loading. So let's see, Llama, they have multiple shards, right? If they have an application thread, they can do parallel loading shards. Then this may benefit from image pooling, because essentially, because currently image pooling is sequential, right? You are just turning a sequential image pooling with streaming, you can do parallel pushing. So that's the thing. You burn CPU, burn network bandwidth, but you put in content sooner. But this side effect, I don't think this technology was designed this way, but it just happened that if you have an application do a parallel model with loading, you can benefit from this technology by reducing some loading time.
And I guess even the for the streaming part and the shared chunks, the shared content addressable chunks and that sort of thing, like that area, even in the container image for the application before you even get to loading the weights, those images can be many gigabytes.
Oh,
so,
yeah, you are right. So we are, but we're talking about the large language model, because if the weights, the weights is kind of 30 gig. Your base image has a 2 or 3 gig. I mean, you see benefit, but just not that, as you can imagine, it's not 10x.
The weights are the big story, for sure.
Yeah, it's not 10x, speed up. It's just something like that.
Okay, I think Ray, you have something to catch up on and formulate some topics for next time. With that, you can get 10 minutes back.
Thank you. Thanks, all.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.